we're evolved to like see the subtle little smiles and somebody affirming us, and that's like a lot. What do you do when hundreds or thousands of people go, yes? What do you, like, your ego?
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to do with it. Either I become like an insane narcissist that's like, yes, I am worthy of praise, or you like let it move through you, or you realize that it's not really about you in some weird way. Like you're kind of part of this experience where people are experiencing something in their own bodies and in their own lives, and you're like kind of a conduit involved in it, right. But you can't like make it about you. Otherwise what do you do with all of that? You can't handle it.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking about that today, that in broad strokes terms, it sort of gives you three main options. Like you can either choose to accept with open arms, like you mentioned, all of that praise, which I can't see how that doesn't make you a monster after a while.
Right, yeah.
It has to do something to you. Or you can wholeheartedly reject that praise.
Right.
Kind of brings you back to where we are now. Or you can kind of ignore it and fully let it flow through you, but then it's almost not as fun in a way. Like it's still fulfilling. It's still, at least for me, like it still means something, but you don't get that little snap that makes it worth going on stage versus sitting and playing it alone. So I always find myself very conflicted with how to process it, because a lot of the stuff that feels like it should be the unhealthy part is the part that I think I actually like, but not the part that I think I actually am. And I end up chasing my tail for a while.
I think my favorite, I don't know about you guys, but my favorite moments live or in moments where there's applause is when I'm caught up and I feel like I'm part of it. So I'm still there's still like the exhilaration, there's still the affirmation of what's happening and a pleasure in the work that's being done, but it doesn't feel like I've given them something and now I'm lacking. It's like we are giving each other this moment together and we're part of it together. And then everybody's satisfied. And when it doesn't feel like a one-sided giver or receiver, it's just like, yeah, we're all here and we're all loving this experience together. Those are my favorite moments.
Yeah. I just recently read Grist for the Mill, and I like the part where Ram Dass is talking about, being on a stage and resenting that he has to be so far away from the audience, resenting that you can't get a little bit closer, and like wanting to kind of speak from the orchestra pit, or when you make the audience and performer separate from one another, like that's when a lot of that, separateness can happen. Yeah. Yeah.
And certain rooms and venues and situations make that worse or better. Like I love, like my favorite kind of spaces, if you can ever be like in the round or something like it. I love that when it feels like we're all together in some way. My least favorite ones are like the stage is so much higher than everybody else and everyone's kind of like from a distance watching you. Those are my least favorite too.
Yeah.
Have you ever done any of those like round robin shows where you're up there with a couple of other like songwriters or something like that? Like there's a few distinct performers on stage kind of rotating through stuff in like a storyteller's fashion?
Yeah, those are fun.
Well, I find that those give me a different sense of this whenever I play those. Like it's like the validation's coming from a few more directions when and it feels a little bit more fair in a way. Like I feel like what I'm getting from the crowd, I can average out with what I'm getting from the people next to me who are doing the exact same thing that I'm doing, but don't have any obligation to love or loathe my material the way that I do. And I don't know, it just comes down to math kind of in a way when I do that. It's like I can sort of make these scales balance, and it makes more sense to me when I have those shows, and it always feels different. I don't know that it feels better, but it doesn't feel quite as much like this like seesaw thing where I could never possibly give back this level of energy to a crowd and have it feel the way that it's feeling when they're giving it to me. Even if I am, like, even if I'm absolutely on the ball and playing a good show or something, it will never feel like the feeling of hundreds of people screaming back at you. That's just a thing that's its own feeling.
Its own thing. It's crazy. Like towards the end of my really busy touring career, because we haven't been touring much the last few years, but I was getting to the point where I'd had to spend so much time like in silence through the day by myself just to try to keep some sort of, not the seesaw thing that you mentioned. It's a lot of like adrenaline and just chemicals. And when you do that for years on end, like, you don't want so many musicians end up like strung out and addicted to something. Cause it's like you're out of balance. You're like, hi, and then you just stuck in a green room that stinks.
Yeah.
That's like all over the wall, and then it's like it's a crazy existence. And so like I was really trying to figure out how do you live a life where there's all like just hormonally and like the chemicals in your brain that are being spiked every night at 9 p.m. or whatever. How do you balance that out? It's a crazy life to have.